Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto become a Black Rose ninja and summoned Nyx. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Alucard and Ceres were taking care of their 6-year-old little girl Nyx when it happened a fire broke out in the mansion just as the Iscariot had planned. Nyx really was a rare event. Vampires can only reproduce once every 500 years. Ceres, where's Nyx? Alucard shouted. She ran off, I can't find her, Ceres responded. Get out of the mansion, I'll find her, Alucard said as he ran off into the inferno to find his daughter. Little did they know she was already out of the mansion. Scared and confused, she ran until she found a cave. Looking back, she could see she was being followed and she knew they meant her harm. She ran into the cave hoping to run into someone who would help her. She ran and ran. She sensed she was no longer in England, but where she didn't know. Just then she bumped into someone. He looked about 12, but he had an expression that he was more mature than most people. He had long black hair that he had in a ponytail. He also wore a weird headband with a weird symbol that looked like a leaf. Then she heard of the Iscariots rambling a noise she didn't want to hear. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, all monster will burn in hell for eternity, amen. The man said with blade heading straight for little Nyx. She screamed. She couldn't run any more. Then she heard a sound she was not accepting. Clang. She opened her eyes and saw that the boy she bumped into now held a strange weapon and was fighting off the Iscariot agent. You're the one about to murder a helpless child in cold blood, and yet you call her a monster. You're the only monster here, the boy said in angered voice. He indeed was ticked off that he came here to train when this girl no older than his little brother Sasuke bumped into him, and then some guy was trying to kill her. Oh no, he would not let that happen. The man, embarrassed that he was outmatched by a boy, ran back to the cave to meet back up with the rest of his group. Then the boy focused his attention on the scared little girl. She had hair as black as the night. Her skin was as pale as moonlight and her eyes were green like the leaves on the trees. He then noticed the burns and tattered clothing. He reached out to the girl, who shrunk back in fear with a whimper. It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Itachi. What's yours? He said. He tried to examine her injuries. My name is Nyx, she said in a very quiet voice. He realized she needed medical attention. He picked her up and rushed off with her to the hospital. He also reasoned that her parents were dead because of the man that attacked her. He dropped her at the hospital, then went to go work something out with his parents. After all, the girl looked an awful lot like an Uchiha. She could maybe hide as one of the family because nobody would dare bother a whole clan, but he was really going to have to do a lot of negotiating with his family to make it work. Back at the mansion, the fire had died down and the Iscariot had fled, but Alucard was in a foul mood. He had lost his daughter. He looked everywhere for her, but there was no sign of her, not even the custom-made locket he gave her. It was a black rose inscribed, "To the Night Rose." He sighed. He still had hope his daughter was out there alive. Nyx's childhood was very strange. While she lived in the Uchiha household, she had the urge to hunt rabbits and other small creatures, bite them, and she was always yelled at for it, along with slapped by her new parents. Eventually she stopped and started drinking warm tomato juice to calm what her new parents called sickened urges. She would wear nothing but black clothing and had unusually big canines, so she was viewed as weird by other kids. She didn't make any friends until she came across a boy named Naruto, which she quickly befriended, but put her at odds with her new parents, calling him a monster that should be left alone, but that didn't deter her. 2 years later, Nyx came home late from school because she was playing with Naruto and found a horror show, a lot of death and a lot of blood. Sasuke was running away from something when he saw her and grabbed her hand. Don't ask, just run, we have to get away, he said just as he said that Itachi apart in front of both of them. What's going on? Nyx said, looking back and forth between Sasuke and Itachi. Nyx, come on, run, he'll kill us, Sasuke said. She start when a shuriken cut her cheek. She then got the message and started running. After a few minutes, Itachi appeared in front of them again, this time with a message. You two aren't even worth killing. Go ahead, run, cling to your fragile lives, foster your hatred of me and become stronger, then come try and kill me. With that he vanished, leaving both of them alone. Sasuke started crying. Nyx just stood there. She could help but feel this has happened to her before. Now she is 13. She had just graduated. It was along with her cousin, Sasuke. She was now waiting to be paired up in Team Kin. Nyx and Seiko are in Team 11 inches. Nyx dropped her head on the table. Why Kin? She thought to herself. Kin Haruto had dirty blonde hair with brown eyes. He was a bully to nix his favorite nicknames. Goth Girl. And Fang Face. Sure, Sasuke drove him off when he was around, but he wasn't going to be around. She was going to have to deal with this guy on a daily basis now. Seiko Hoshiko Nix didn't mind. He had dark brown hair with kind blue eyes. He was pretty nice, although he was very clumsy. You never give him anything breakable to him unless you want it broken, but ironically he was an ace with long-range weapons and he had a knack for finding the truth even if it's by accident. Now all three of them waited for their sensei. Team 11, you're coming with me, a female voice said. Nix lifted her head of the table to see a green-haired woman standing in front of the classroom. She sighed and stood up along with her new team and walked out onto the training field. Now then, my name is Chika of the Kozu clan, the woman stated. Tell me a bit about yourselves, like your name, your likes and dislikes, and your dream. Who's going first? She asked with a confident smile on her face. Kin raised his hand in excitement. I will. My name is Kin of the Haruto clan, he said, looking smug. I like exploring new places. I dislike cleaning my room. At this, Nix started to giggle. He ignored it and went on. My dream is to become a Jonin commander. That's some dream, Chika said with a grin. Now how about you? She asked, pointing to Seiko. My name is Seiko of the Hoshiko clan. My likes mystery novels, my dislike smug jerks, he said, staring at Kin. Kin glared right back at him. My dream is to be the best investigative ninja, he said with a proud look on his face. That's also a good dream. Now Nix, is it? It's your turn. Chika looked at Nix, waiting for an answer. My name is Nix and everyone thinks of me as an Uchiha, but I don't think I am. My likes are the stars and black roses, along with drawing. My dislikes, I can't stand garlic. My dream to find out where I came from and why I'm so different, she said with a somewhat sadness voice. Kin looked like he was going to burst into laughter. You hate garlic? What, are you a vampire? Well, that would make sense with those fangs, he said with a smug look. Stop it, you do not make fun of your teammates, Chika said with a stern look. Now everyone will come back here in the morning for their first mission. The Black Rose Ninja. Nix went back to the apartment she shared with Sasuke. She got a can of tomato juice out of the fridge and heated it in the microwave. She was tired and didn't feel like cooking tonight, so she just finished her drink and went to bed. She woke up early and went to the bathroom to get ready for her first official mission, but when she looked in the mirror she let out a high-pitched scream. Sasuke was on his way out the door when he heard Nix scream. He instinctively ran to where she was and kicked in the door. What's wrong? He asked when he saw Nix with her hands on her head. Nothing, I was just overreacting again, Nix said with a weird smile. She did not remove her hands from her head. Sasuke ran up and tried to remove her hands from her head. Come on, your hair can't look that bad, and since when do you care? Sasuke said, finally prying her hands off her head, and once he did he got a good look at the problem, and it was not a bad hair day. In fact, he did know what to call it. Okay, I'll be going now. Good luck with your problem, he said as he left Nix by herself to contemplate her problem. Nix grabbed a hat hoping that would be enough. She already had enough trouble, she didn't need this. Nix found her way to the spot they were supposed to wait at. Kin was already there. Kin started laughing at the sight of her. What's with the hat? He asked with a smug look on his face. Nix glared at Kin. Just then they heard a voice. Sorry I'm late, Seiko said, running in at full speed. I had to whoa. Then he tripped over a rock, crashing into Nix, sending her hat flying. Both of them stood up. Geez, I'm sorry, Nix. Seiko and their new sensei, Chika, had priceless looks on their faces. Kin just burst into laughter. You sprouted bad ears, he said, still laughing up a storm. Nix just grabbed the hat she dropped and placed it firmly on her head. She was absolutely mortified. Alright, let's focus on the mission, shall we? Chika-sensei stated, trying not to laugh at Nix's unfortunate situation. We'll be picking up trash in the river today. Meanwhile, not far from where Team 11 was meeting, a blonde-haired boy with cat ears was talking into a radio. Major, I think I found the girl we're looking for, he said in a weird accent. Ah, good job, bring her in alive. We want to get some good tests out of her, said a voice over the radio. Roger, over and out. The boy put away the radio with a smug look on his face. Soon we'll have all the data we need, the boy said as he followed the unaware team. After the river was cleaned up, Chika-sensei suggested something before she left to nix something she should have tried at the beginning. Why don't you use transformation jutsu to hide your new ears? It would work a lot better than that hat, she said as she pointed at the headgear Nix wore. Oh yeah, that would work a lot better, thank you Chika-sensei. Well, Kin cut in. I'm outta here later baddie. He ran off laughing. Seiko rolled his eyes then turned back to Nix. Hey Nix, want me to walk you home? He asked with a slight blush on his face. Nah. Nix answered back. I'm heading out to the training fields but thanks for offering. She then headed off by herself. Alucard had completely given up hope of ever finding his daughter. Mostly the only pleasure he took now was in killing or in teasing others. Alucard, shouted Sir Integra. I have a mission for you and Sarah's. Alucard smiled at the thought of more vampires for him to kill. There have been sighting of freaks a few miles northward and that's far to close. She said, removing her cigar from her mouth. I fear they might be planning an attack. Your orders are simple: search and destroy. She pounded her fists against the desk. Alucard bowed and said, consider it done my master, then went off to get Sarah's. Tonight was going to be another great night. It was get very late. Nix was trying out a new jutsu she had learned, Black Rose Jutsu Petal Dance of Death. Again all she got was a breeze of petals, not the full-out razor wind of petals she wanted when she heard a voice with a weird accent. Oh, that very pretty, but by the name of it I can tell that's not what you're going for. Nix turned around and saw a boy wearing a hat and a strange uniform. Allow me to introduce myself, my name's Schrödinger, he said as he walked toward Nix. I work for Millennium led by the Major and he would so like to meet you, Nix Helsing. Nix stared in disbelief. I think you have the wrong person. My name is Nix Uchiha, she said. Schrödinger shrugged. No it isn't, I know for a fact you name is Nix Helsing. You don't remember a thing, do you? He asked with fake concern in his voice, getting very close to her. I don't know what you're talking about, Nix said, trying to avoid eye contact. Yes you do, you have a sense of not belonging here. Don't you? You've always been different, such as the bat ears you're hiding. I have something like that, it's nothing to be ashamed of, Schrödinger said, pulling off his hat, revealing 2 cat ears on the top of his head. See, you're just like me, and like me you have many hidden abilities far beyond normal humans' understanding, he said. Nix just stared in shock. Just come with me and I'll tell you everything, he said while right into her ear, leave Nix with a tough decision to make. Nix was about to answer when she heard a familiar voice, Sasuke's. Get away from her, he shouted as he punches Schrödinger, who flies a good ways away and hits a tree. Ouch, what the hell was that for? Schrödinger asked. Get up. I don't take too kindly to people flirting with my cousin, he said, glaring daggers at Schrödinger. Well, Schrödinger started when a voice came over the radio he was carrying. Schrödinger, you have to. The message was cut off by a bang that Nix recognized. Well, I guess we'll talk some other time, he said. Nix simply nodded and he disappeared, but Sasuke chased after him. Get back here, you will not come near her again, he shouted, trying to follow him. Nix meanwhile stayed where she was and thought about what Schrödinger had said. She closed her eyes and searched her mind to try and remember, but then hit a wall. Her mind just would let her continue. She normally would give up, but not this time. She tried harder and harder and the wall began to give. She began to see memories of people in strange clothing. They were smiling at her. She tried hard to remember who they were and what they meant to her. Just then she heard a voice that made her come back to reality. Nix, Nix. She looked up and saw Sasuke and he didn't look happy. What? She said, coming out of her daze. Did you hear what I said? I asked if that guy did anything or said anything to you. What was his goal? He said, glaring at her. Don't be mad, he wanted me to come with him, she said, looking down to avoid his glare. If he comes around you again, just run. Okay, find me or one of the high-ranking ninjas. I have a bad feeling about that guy, Sasuke said, now extremely worried. Come on, I'm taking you home, he said as he grabbed Nix by the arm. Back home, Nix went straight to her room. She grabbed some paper and began to draw. She was always a doodler and she wanted to get these faces on paper before they left her head again. One by one the drawing came to life. They looked like actual people that she knew at one time or another. Then she drew an image that brought her terror. I was a man in shadow, hold 2 blades with across the bottom tip long, then the other tips. She placed it face down and looked at another drawing, one of another man. He had messy black hair and beast-like eyes. If she were to add color they'd be red. He was smiling, his were teeth jagged, he looked like a monster, but the face brought only comfort to her. It felt like she was safe when she saw that face. She looked at all her other works as she drifted off to sleep. Alucard had gotten rid of all the freaks in the area. He saw a familiar face. Schrödinger, what was he doing here, he thought when he caught a familiar scent off of him. His eyes opened wide. Nix. He slammed Schrödinger up against a tree. Where is she? He growled. Ceres was already done killing off the last of the freaks when she heard Alucard. She turned to see him hold of all people Schrödinger by the collar. I don't know what you're talking about, Schrödinger said smugly. Bad move. Alucard tightened his grip. Don't play dumb with me. Nix's scent is all over you. Where is she? He practically roared. Ceres felt like she was going to faint. Her daughter was alive. I can't tell you that, sorry, but I'm bored, so bye-bye, he said as he vanished into thin air. Alucard started to curse in his native tongue, then he looked back at Ceres, who looked like she was hit with a ton of bricks. Come on, we have to inform my master. Sasuke woke up and got up to get ready as usual, but when he walked past Nix's door he saw it was open, which was unusual. He peeked inside and saw her tossing and turning. She was in the middle of a nightmare. He grabbed her, then shook her to wake her up. Nix, wake up, he shouted. Nix opened her eyes. She had just had the most horrible dream of fire and men with blades. She shivered. It was just a dream, relax, he said as he left the room. He didn't want to deal with this. Nix decided to get out of bed and get ready to meet up with her team for their next mission. So the girl isn't dead like we thought, Eriko Maxwell said as he read an email from his Helsing spy. He slammed the table with his fist. Anderson, I want you to go back and find that cave and destroy that girl, he shouted. Alexander Anderson smiled. All monsters will burn for eternity in hell, amen. Nix had finished her mission with her team, which was gather herbs for the hospital. After a few insults from Kin, she had decided to go see Naruto. They told each other everything, and with the recent events she had a lot to get off her chest. She found Naruto at the ramen bar like she thought she would. Hey Naruto, Nix shouted. Naruto looked over and smiled. Oh hey Nix, what you been up to, he said as he motioned for her to sit next to him. A lot of stuff, Nix said. Sit down. She started to explain everything that happened to her recently when she noticed Naruto was staring at her hands. What's wrong? She asked. You got some kind of rash on your hand, Naruto replied. Nix looked at her hand and he was right, there were red lines forming a 5-pointed star on the back of her hand. Nix, it's on the other one too, Naruto shouted, pointing at her left hand. She looked at her other hand and saw another 5-pointed star. Nix sighed and slammed her head on the counter. Naruto stared at her, then started stirring his ramen. I'm guessing you had a lot of problems lately, he said, beginning to eat again. Nix nodded. She took out her sketchbook and gave it to Naruto to look at. He had just finished his 7th bowl of ramen and was flipping through the pages when he got the ones he hadn't seen. Nix paid the bill for both her and Naruto and they both left. They both then headed for the training field, Naruto still looking through her sketchbook. Back at the Helsing mansion, Alucard was trying to set up a mind link with Nix. He just knew keeping her blood would come in handy someday. He pulled it out and drank it. It tasted horrible as it was very old, but with her being 13 years old she could now form mental links, so this was his only chance to find his daughter. He sighed and then sat in his chair. It will take a few hours for a connection to form, but I'm willing to wait. Hey Nix, who are these people? Naruto asked, handing the sketchbook back. Not sure, I seem to remember their faces but I can't seem to remember their names, Nix replied. They begin to train with each other. They started dodging kunai when Nix sensed a blade heading straight for her chest, but with her training she easily dodged it. Naruto, that could have killed me, Nix shouted. But I didn't throw that, he said, pointing to the blade stuck in the tree. Nix opened her mouth to say something, but then they heard a voice. Aren't you up a little too early, monster? Both Naruto and Nix turned to where the voice was coming from and prepared to fight. Who are and what do you want? Naruto shouted. A man stepped out of the shadows with a blade in each hand and a cross hanging from his neck. Nix started to shiver at this but stiffened up so she could be ready to strike. My name is Alexander Anderson, and in the name God I shall send all monsters to hell to burn for eternity, he said, crossing the blades to make a cross. There are no monsters here, so keep it moving, Naruto shouted. Anderson started to laugh. Apparently you haven't noticed the one right over there, he said pointing at Nyx. I'm no monster, do you have bad vision or something? Nyx shouted. Anderson started to laugh again. It's amazing, you look just like your father yet you act and sound just like your mother. Killing you will be like kill both your parents at the same time, he said still laughing. My parents? My parents are dead, what do you know about them? Nyx shouted, throwing several kunais at their attacker. Naruto also prepared himself using Shadow Clone Just You and started to rush him. Anderson easily threw Naruto away but did not dodge the kunais Nyx threw at him. He then found himself impaled on a tree with kunais piercing his flesh in every which way. Wow, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Let's go get Kakashi Sensei, he'll know what to do from here, Naruto said, but as he did Anderson broke free of the tree and grabbed Naruto, throwing him at the tree as he laughed like a maniac. No way, he's still alive, Nyx screamed, said in disbelief, backing up. Naruto, are you okay? Nyx asked. Yeah, I'm alright, Naruto stated while he was struggling to stand. Sit back down, child, I'm not after you, I'm merely trying to protect you from the monster here. By killing my friend I won't let you, Naruto said, rushing in front of Nyx. Naruto, you got a signal flare? Nyx whispered. Yeah, I got one. Why? He whispered back. Shoot it off, idiot, she whispered harshly at him. Right, he said, shooting it off into the sky, hoping someone would see it as they prepared themselves to fight, when Nyx heard a voice in her head that she swore she had heard before. Nyx, where are you? Nyx thought she was going crazy. She had just heard a voice in her head, but she decided to ignore it and got ready to fend off the crazed man, hoping someone had seen their flare and was coming to their rescue. You really think this thing is your friend, huh? She is nothing more than the daughter of two monsters, and that's all she will ever be, a monster, Anderson said as he throws his blades toward awfully close to Naruto and right for Nyx's head. She dug it, but it had cut Naruto's cheek as a result, and Nyx could smell the blood. It was as if a switch was flipped inside of her. She quickly jumped in front of Naruto and formed hand signs. Kill him, Nyx, slaughter him, she heard in ringing in her head. She gladly obeyed the voice. Black Rose, just to pedal dance of death, she shouted, throwing Anderson back a few feet. Nyx smirked, but the smirk was soon gone when she heard Anderson's laugh again. Rather impressive, I have to say. I've never seen one of your kind do that before. This should be fun killing you, he said. Walked towards her. This time all Nyx's courage was gone, even with voice in her head telling her to destroy him. She didn't know what to do. Any attack she or Naruto uses, he gets right back up. Anderson was through a huge amount of blades that Nyx could not possibly dodge even with her training, when out of nowhere the were knocked out of the air. I wouldn't do that if I were you, a voice said. Kakashi Sensei, Naruto shouted as Kakashi appeared from the shadows. Nyx, Naruto, get out of here, I'll hold him off, he said. Anderson just stood there grinning like a maniac. Nyx and Naruto ran, but both got thrown back by some sort of barrier. What is this? Naruto shouted. Anderson looked on in shock. He expected Nyx to get boxed in, but the boy with her, that was an unexpected surprise. That is a barrier that unholy creators cannot penetrate. Looks like I'm going to have to kill the both of you. I didn't expect for the boy to be a monster as well, but I goose, it's two for the price of one, Anderson said, grinning again. Not while I'm here, Kakashi said, pulling out a kunai and rushing him, cutting deep into his arm, but Anderson healed it almost right away. Kakashi looked on in shock as Anderson stood there cackling. You can't hurt me like that, but I guess if you showed up there will be more of you coming that are willing to defend these monsters, so I'll leave, but I'll be back, and the next time I'll booker them, he said, placing his hand on a book and disappearing into a tornado of papers. Kakashi then dropped his guard and ran over to Nyx and Naruto. Are you two okay? He asked with clear concern. Yeah, all I got was a little scratch, Naruto said. Nyx on the other hand started to cry. This was the worst. She had bat ears sprouting from her head, strange markings appearing on her hands, a boy trying to lure her away from the village for who knows what, and now a maniac trying to kill not only her but her best friend too. Could her life get any worse? Whoa, Nyx, you okay? How hard did he hit you? Naruto said, freak out. Naruto, calm down, go get Sasuke and tell him to meet us over at the hospital, Kakashi said, grabbing Nyx while she was wondering what the fuss was about until she looked at her hands. She was crying blood. Sasuke arrived extremely panicked and rushed to the room she was at. She was in the middle of another test while Kakashi was standing outside the door. Is she okay? He asked. There's no serious injuries, so she should be okay, he said calmly. Sasuke rushed in to see Nyx with bloody tears streaming down her cheek. Nyx, are you okay? He asked. Yeah, I just started crying blood all the sudden, she said. The doctor went out of the room and asked for them to wait. After the tests were done, the doctor was scratching his heading back to the room when another doctor about to end his shift looked over and noticed the complaint on one of his co-workers' clipboard. He grabbed it out of his hands. I handle this one, he said reassuringly. His co-worker trusted him. He was the oldest medical ninja on staff. Although he did look that old, he had transferred from another hospital a while back. He then walked into the room. One whiff of her scent confirmed his suspicions. She was like himself, a vampire, and she didn't know it. He noticed she wasn't alone. He couldn't just blab out here, but the girl need to know and be trained on how to use her powers. Ms. Uchiha, I'm Dr. Michi Yasu. I looked at your tests and you're just fine, he said. Sasuke got up to protest. What? She's crying blood and that's not a major problem, he screamed at Michi. He was really protective of Nyx, even though he didn't show it that often. She his only family left. He never even wanted her to become a ninja, but she was stubborn. It's a rare genetic condition that causes the tear ducts to bleed from time to time. It's nothing to worry about, Michi said calmly. He had dealt with overprotective people before and it didn't help to get all riled up. He went over to Nyx and looked her over as though he slipped a note in her pocket. He then discharged them and left the hospital. He had his work cut out for him. Nyx went back to her room, get ready to sleep, when she heard the crinkle in her pocket. She took out the note. Dear Ms. Uchiha, I have a lot to explain to you about what you are. Meet me at the bridge at 12 a.m. Nyx looked at her clock. 10:30. She had an hour and 30 minutes. She decided she would sneak out as soon as Sasuke was asleep, but she would not go alone after the attack in the woods. It wouldn't hurt to bring someone along, and she knew just the person. Nyx pressed her ear up against the wall and heard Sasuke fast asleep. He had a bit of a snoring problem. It wasn't that bad, but it was enough for Nyx to know when he was sleeping. She snuck out the window and ran to an apartment building and knocked on the door really loudly. Do you know what time it is? Naruto yelled at her. She shoved the note in his face. He simply read it. As you can see, it doesn't say come alone, Nyx said smugly. Yeah, okay, give me a sec, Naruto replied, shutting the door so he could get dressed. After that, they went and waited by the bridge like the note told them to. At midnight, a shape appeared on the other side of the bridge. Nyx and Naruto tensed up and waited for the figure to make the first contact. Ms. Uchiha, I see you didn't come alone, a familiar voice said calmly. The figure then stepped forward to reveal himself as Michi, the doctor from the hospital. Naruto was the first to speak out. So what do you have to explain? He said. Well, I'd really just like to explain this to Ms. Uchiha, Michi replied. Whatever you have to say to me you can say to Naruto. He's my best friend and it's Nyx, not Ms. Uchiha. Nyx shouted. I see. Well, there's no use beating around the bush, so I just get straight to the point, he said calmly. You're a vampire. He braced himself for a reaction. I'm a what? Nyx replied. Naruto simply looked at the guy like this was a joke. That's crazy, there's no such thing, he said. Oh really? Michi said, disappearing into the mist. Just then he appeared right behind Naruto and Nyx. How did you do that? Naruto asked. I can only unteach Nyx how to do that. We are the same species. Any other questions? Michi replied. Is that why I'm being chased after by maniacs and have these bat ears coming out of my head and these weird marks on my arm? She asked, dropping the transformation she used to hide these strange things that were happening to her. Naruto tried to stop himself from laughing while Michi only stared. Well, the bat ears are normal but not this fast, and the markings on your hand, well, I've never seen them, but yes, that would explain the maniacs in your life. They're probably hunters or people to look at get a hold of your power. How long ago did you get bit? He asked while looking for bite marks. Bitten? I was never bitten by anything, she said as she pushed him away. Well, I have one other explanation, he said as she again used transformation to cover up all the strange things happening to her. You were born a vampire. I heard this only happens once every 500 years, but most of them are killed before they reach the age of 1 by either vampire hunter or other vampires. You're very lucky to be alive, he said, looking toward the sky. Wait, there was a family of vampires in the village, Naruto said. Who knew? Nyx sniffled a little at this. I knew it. I was always different and now I know why. Thank you, she said, starting to cry, but not out of sadness but out of joy. She was finally getting some answers. Right, well, no use crying over it. Now I will train you to use your powers. See me every day in the training fields at 11 o'clock, Michi stated. Nyx simply nodded. Oh, and another thing, I'll be bring you blood to drink. I expect you to drink it and not waste it. It's hard enough getting it for myself, but for two that's even harder, he said calmly, leaving Nyx with her mouth wide open. Naruto simple looked at his friend then sighed. She made him promise not to tell anyone unless her life depended on it, which he did. She and Naruto then parted company. He went back to his apartment and she snuck back into the window with ease, but as soon as she put her foot on the ground the light came on. "Where were you?" Sasuke shouted. "It doesn't matter," Nyx screamed back. "Yes, it does. You've been attacked today. Where did you go?" he said, trying to watch his temper. "Well, I'm not saying," she said, sticking her tongue out. "I'll find out somehow, so you might as well tell me now," he said, crossing his arms. "Sorry, but I'm tired, so out of my room," she said, throwing pillows at him as he left with a scowl on his face. He sighed once he shut the door. He just was so worried about her. She was all he had left. He slammed his door shut and went to bed. Nyx had been sneaking out for a while, and now it was easier than ever now that Sasuke was on a mission in the Land of Waves. Yes, the mission from the TV show, but her training wasn't. Michi pushed her hard and forced her to drink blood at least once a week. "It will make you stronger and keep you from going nuts around the people you care about," he would say. Sometime a voice in her head would talk to her and say that he's right, but when she tried to press the voice for more answers it would fade away. Alucard always was cursing that the link was too weak. He is only able to find her in times of danger or bloodlust. He was very frustrated. He knew she was alive, yet he could get to her. What kind of unlife king left his daughter to fend for herself? But then he remembered that she was fighting with grace and agility before he showed. Maybe she had learned to defend herself, he thought to himself. He smiled with pride at the thought that his own daughter was a fighter. He simply tried to contact her again, not to talk, no, that took too much energy, but to observe what she was doing when he looked through her eyes and hear with her ears. "You're getting there, but still not fast enough," a man said. "But Michi-sensei, I ran around the whole training field in under a minute," Nyx said, out of breath. "That would be impressive if you were just a ninja, but me and you both know you're not. Now go do it again, and you don't need to breath, so just focus on speed and forget about breathing," he said. Nyx only sighed. "Fine." Alucard started to laugh. His daughter was a ninja. A sense of pride started to set in. She's probably the strongest one there too, he thought as his link got cut off. Nyx was putting a lot into her training in the morning. All she wanted to do was sleep, but she had mission to do, so she would pull through it and then take a nap. Sasuke came home while she was taking one of her new routine naps. "I'm back," he said, seeing as the door was unlocked. "Nyx, are you here?" he said, peeking into her room. She simply pulled the covers over her head. She wanted him to leave her alone. "Rough day. I'm guessing I'll leave you alone," he said, closing her door. The next day she got a surprise. "Well, I've recommended you all for the chunin examens," Chika said with a smile. Kin started to jump up and down in excitement while Seiko simple smiled with anticipation. Nyx was happy but at the same time unhappy. Now Michi-sensei would work her twice as hard. "Meet at room 301 at this time in the academy. Don't be late," she said, and then walk off. Nyx so was happy about this. Now she could just go home and sleep. She ran off as fast as she could but was stopped when she ran head first. Weird ninja she didn't recognize. He had red hair and turquoise eyes and it looked like he hadn't slept in forever. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just in a hurry to get home," she stated. "I'm Nyx. What's your name?" she said, stick out her hand and smiling. "Gaara, but that's none of your concern," he said in an unemotional voice. "I should kill you, but since you seem nice, so I'll leave you alone." Nyx looked at him like he was crazy as he walked, but just then she ran out of chakra and poof, her ears and red lines on her hands appeared. "Eep," she said, running back to her house and slamming the door. She slept for the rest of the day and got up to go train again, but on her way there she ran into a familiar face. Schrödinger. "Hello, Nyx," he said as he jumped out of a tree. "I'm not really supposed to talk to," started, but she was then cut off by Schrödinger laughing. "Why? Because your cousin said so. Do you always do what he tells you to do?" he said. "Well, no, but," she started again. "But what? You can think for yourself, right?" "Yes, but he doesn't trust you and I trust my cousin's instincts," Nyx yelled so she could get a word in. "But you want to know where you're from, right? If you come with me I'll tell you everything about you past and what you are." "I know what I am. I'm a vampire and a ninja of the Leaf Village. I'm not leaving. I find my past on my own," she shouted. "Well then I guess since negotiation aren't working I'm going to have to use force," he said as he vanishes. "Where did he go?" Nyx thought out loud to herself. When she turned around he was right there. She then jumped back out surprised and pulled out a kunai and threw it at him, and it hit him straight in the eye and he fell to ground in a heap. Nyx then ran in the direction she knew Michi was in when she ran into Schrödinger alive and healthy. But what just happened? Nyx said as she jumped back, surprised that he still even two eyes. I am everywhere and nowhere, you can't get away from me that easy, he said as he crept closer, but then a kunai came flying right in front of him as a warning. Step away from my student, I can see you're a vampire but you don't have good intentions, Michi stated as he came out the shadows. Fine, I can see I'm not get her to come with me today, but you will eventually, Nyx Helsing. He shouts as he disappears in the shadows. Nyx ran up to Michi, scared as all hell. That was no ordinary vampire, he didn't smell right, Michi said. What do you mean? Nyx said. Let's discuss that another time, for now I want you to run around this field 100 times. Michi said, getting back to his cheer self. Nyx looked at him like he was crazy but got to work anyway. As she did though, Michi looked to the sky and thought about what he said. Helsing, I've never heard that name before, I'm going to have to look into that. Nyx worked hard to get ready for the chunin examens. Michi let her skip training the night before the examens so she get some needed rest. She woke up refreshed and ready for the challenge. She rushed over to the academy. She and her team quickly ran up to the 3rd floor only to find out they were on the 2nd floor and had one more floor to go. They finally made it and got let in. After an encounter with the other ninjas, everyone took their seats. Nyx was sitting right next to a boy with purple face paint, apparently named Konkuro. She then focused her mind and started reading minds, scanning them for answers when she came across a very distracted mind, or maybe he was just distracted at the moment, but she didn't like what he was thinking. I wonder what that hot goth chick would be like in bed. She noticed it was coming from the boy next to her. She decided to use a little trick Michi taught her. She turned her eyes into a vampire's eyes, which had greater field of vision but looked very creepy. It was blood red with silted pupils. It made her look like a monster. She then looked over at him. He immediately looked away and was very creeped out. She then went back to do scan minds in the room. Then the proctor threatened them with the 10th question. I'm sure you know about it. She read his mind and knew she just had to stay, but Kin was about get up. She focused her mind on his and sent him a message. You sit back down, he's bluffing, she said mentally. As tough as she could sound, he quickly sat back down. The proctor then announced that they all passed and told them to move on to the next stage. Nyx simply smiled. She passed the first test. They follow the next proctor out to something they called the Forest of Death. The proctor then explained the rules. They have one scroll, either a heaven scroll or an earth scroll. They would enter through different gates. The goal to get one of each scroll. Kin ran up and got a heaven scroll. They went to the gate they were assigned. The gates opened and Nyx, Seiko and Kin dashed inward toward the complex in the center. Okay, that's all for now. Next time you'll not only see more of Nyx's new abilities but the abilities of her teammates. Nyx scanned the location for anyone in the area who had an earth scroll. When bingo, she found some rock ninjas that were perfect for taking on. She told Seiko and Kin. Seiko simple nodded while Kin had to mouth off. Oh, like we should listen to you, goth girl, he said. Nyx turned tough. She was no longer going to let him push her around. Yes, I sense them close by, so shut your big mouth, she said. She heard their beating heart as they got closer. She began to think more like a predator than a ninja, but she was very careful not to consider her teammates as food. The rock ninjas attacked first, which probably made them feel pretty cocky. Seiko simply smiled and pulled out his sebans, hit the attacker in his pressure points, which was enough to knock him out. Kin formed a few hand signs. Fire's style solar flare jutsu, which made a wall of fire around the rest of them so they couldn't escape. Nyx then used her own hand signs. Black Rose Jutsu Shadow Rose of Death. A rose pop out of the ground and surrounded them. It was set to crush them like a bug. You know, I'm feeling a bit generous today, so just hand over the scroll and we'll spare your life. She bluffed with her vampire eyes activated, which made her look absolutely bloodthirsty. They scream out that they give up just not to kill them. She dropped the jutsu just to grab the scroll and walked off with her team. She only full dropped the jutsu once she sensed she was far enough away. They set up camp. No use going any farther right now. She started to relax a bit but still kept her guard up. She was just start to drift off to sleep when she sensed someone she knew was in trouble. She searched the woods with her mind scan and sensed Sakura. She ran as fast as she could through the woods, leavening Kin and Seiko behind. She found Sakura all beat up and saw the maniacs that were doing it. She got all riled up. Something just clicked and her instincts finally came to life. She started to hiss. The sound ninjas looked away from Sakura and toward the bushes. Nyx charged faster. Then anyone could see her and got them away from her, at least for the monument. She then noticed Lee. He was lying on the ground. The sound ninjas look at what they're up against. It looked like the girl was insane. She was growling and hissing, just going nuts. Sakura was baffled that when Ino stepped in and tried to help, Nyx snapped out of it. She saw that Sakura was in good hand and ran off, embarrassed that she had let her instincts get the better of her. She and her team wait until morning to move on to the finish. Once they reach the complex, all they had to do was wait. All the other ninjas had made it, but now there was a problem. Now they had to go through elimination rounds to see who made it to the final. In this one I made no one drop out. First up was Sasuke. He won his match by a long shot and got taken away afterward. Right after him the next two challengers were called Nyx Uchiha and Kabuto Yakushi. The proctor shouted. She looked over at her opponent. He looked pretty confident. She walked down and got ready to fight. She remembered everything Michi-sensei had taught her. Began, he said, starting the match. Nyx shot off like a rocket, not worrying about breathing because she didn't need to breath. Naruto was rooting for her. Everyone else's jaw dropped at how fast she could move. She got in a good punch but quickly realized this will be a lot harder than she thought. He was healing himself. She had to act fast. He was impressed at how fast she could move. He grabbed some paper bombs and attached them to some cuneiforms. Nyx, look out, Naruto warned, but she already saw it coming and formed some hand signs. But the kaboom! Kabuto smiled, but as soon as the smoke cleared all he saw was a giant black rose. Naruto and her team started going nuts. She had shielded herself inside the rose, which was able to withstand the explosion. It then opened up and with incredible speed she was behind him and formed a few hand signs. Black Rose Jutsu Petal Dance of Death, she shouted. He was then surrounded by a thick cloud of razor-sharp petals. When it finally cleared, Kabuto raised up his cut-up hand. I give, he said. Nyx smiled and extended her hand to help him up. He gladly accepted the help. She's very nice, he thought to himself. She went back up the stairs to watch everyone else's fights at peace that, like her cousin, she had made it to the finals. Seiko Hoshiko and Kin Haruto. The proctor called out. Both Kin and Seiko looked at one another. It was right after Hinata's battle with Neji. Nyx had started badgering Neji. He really didn't need to be that rough. Seiko and Kin both had a fierce rivalry. It was bound to come out in this battle. Begin, he said. This was the battle between the Solar Hotshot and the Starlight Ace. Kin formed some hand signs. Solar Flare Jutsu Wall of Fire. Kin shout. A wall surrounded them. Seiko got out his sebans and started to throw them, but he missed. The light from the fire was too bright, which is what Kin wanted. He rushed over and started throwing punches. Seiko got hit pretty good. He jumped outside the ring of fire Kin had made and started forming hand signs. Ninja Art Meteor Shower Jutsu. He shouted, pulling out a bunch of sebans and throwing them. That then got red hot and hit Kin in some pressure points, but before he passed out he used one last jutsu. Ninja Art Eclipse Ray Jutsu, he said weakly, which produced a beam of light coming from his hands, hitting Seiko dead on in the stomach. They then both passed out on the floor. Round over. This was a draw, the proctor said. Neither of them will move on. Nyx looked at her teammates being carried out. She wanted to go with them to make sure they were all right, but she had to stay to pick her number. She pulled on out. It was number 10. She was going to be versing the sound ninja that took out Choji. I don't know his name, I'll find it later. It's the guy with all the bandages. Now all she had to do was to train a lot, but she wanted to see her cousin first. Once she left, she made her way to the hospital. She walked up to the front desk and asked to see Sasuke. I'm sorry, we can't let you in, the nurse said. But I'm his cousin, Nyx replied back. That's what I was told. I'm sorry, we can't bend the rules, she said. Nyx started to growl. Now there's no need for that, a familiar voice said. She turned around. It was Michi-sensei. Maybe he can get her in. She started to smile. I'm going to take this girl on rounds with me, he said. The nurse looked at him like he was insane. She is my student. She needs to learn her way around here so I don't have to train her at odd hours anymore, he said, looking at a clipboard. The nurse nodded and went back to work. You were kidding when said that, right? Nyx asked. No, I'm a medical ninja. You need to be one too, he said. Nyx was confused why she needed to be one, but before she could ask he answered her. If you're a medical ninja, no one will question you when you need to get your hands on blood packets, plus your keen senses as a vampire atomically know who's sickest and what's wrong with them. And this will help you get used to the fact that humans are mortal and you are not, he said. She then understood this was in her best interest. They then stopped by a door. You wanted to see him? Go ahead, make it fast, okay, He said she walk in and say Sasuke he was all beat up. She saw a strange mark on his neck and stared at for a second, but then Michi called for her. She had to go. She left, gently closing the door behind her.
Okay, this will be a simple one, Michi said, opening a door Nick's side, and began what would be a long day. It was the night before the finals. Nyx jumped into bed tired after training so much she went straight to sleep and began to dream, but this wasn't an ordinary dream. Everything was black, and then a man appeared in front of her, wear all red. It was Alucard. He had gathered up his strength to try and contact Nyx in her dreams, but he didn't have much time, 3 minutes at best.
Nyx, it seems you caught the attention of some unwanted company, he said.
Who are you? Why do you keep contacting me? Nyx screamed at him, recognizing him as the voice she hears in her head. I don't have time to explain much, but I can tell you this: I'm your father, he said and smiled at her. Nyx's jaw dropped. Now just listen to me, don't talk. I won't always be able to get to you when these people attack you. Anderson was different because the link was strong at first, but now it's weak when they attack you. Do exactly what I do here. He formed his 2 thumbs and index fingers into a rectangle, and say restriction release level 3, and sometimes go down to 2, never go to 1 or 0 unless you have no other choice. Understand me? He said. She nodded. Good. He started to fade away. I hope I can bring you home soon, Lil Night Rose. That was the last thing she heard before she abruptly woke up. She had heard that phrase before. She looked at her locket that she never took off. It said on the back, to the Night Rose. She then smiled and went back to sleep.
Nyx was so excited her new sensei Michi even took a day off of work to see her fight. He was sitting in a shady spot. He could walk in sunlight, just not for that long. He carried an umbrella to keep him out of it. Her dream from last night was still on her mind. She saw Neji and Naruto fight. She was cheer for Naruto like a maniac, to the point where Shikamaru had enough.
Stop shouting in my ear, you're such a drag, he said. Ops, sorry, Nyx replied. After that it was Shikamaru versus Tamari. She then started looking around for her cousin. She was really getting worried. After that they need more time, so it was her turn. She went down the stairs and faced off with her opponent Dosu. The sound ninja that's wrapped in bandages. In this one he doesn't die before the finals. She knew about his sound jutsu. Her sensei had told her to try to ignore the pain. The more she could do that, the better off she'd be. Her hearing would regenerate afterward. Begin. The proctor shouted. She darted forward, but then she heard the noise blasting in her ears. The pain, it was too much. She quickly retreated to a safe distances. She decided on a long-range attack. Black Rose Jutsu Rose Thorn Sebens. She shouted. Black roses popped out of the ground and fired off the thorns, but his sound was able to interrupt their flight patterns and they missed. She started to growl. This was going nowhere. Now he started to taunt her. Your flowers are pretty, but that's all there. You can't touch me, he said. That was it. She decided to use her new trick, the one she had learned in her sleep. She formed her thumbs and index finger in the shape of a vertical rectangle.
Restriction release level 3 inches, she shouted. Up in the stand.
What kind of jutsu is that? Naruto asked. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about this, Shikamaru said. She suddenly began to surge with power. Her body was surrounded by these inky black shadow tendrils. She focused with her mind and the tendrils attacked, grabbing Dosu. A wicked smile spread across her lips. You thought I couldn't touch you? How well, you were wrong, dead wrong, she said, slightly laughing, her eyes blood red. In the stands, Orochimaru, who as you know is sitting next to the Hokage disguised as the Kasage, became very interested with her abilities. She began to try to use the tendrils to tear Dosu apart.
Stop, match over, the proctor shouted. Nyx quickly snapped out of it and the shadows faded away. The whole stadium was quiet. Winner Nyx Uchiha, he went on. She had won, but she felt like she wanted to cry. She was actually about to kill someone. How could she let it get that far? She ran up the stairs to where the others were.
Nyx, what happened out there? Naruto asked. I used something I shouldn't have. That was way overkill, she responded. Naruto nodded in response. Just then Sasuke showed up with Kakashi by his side. They had shown up just in time. Gaara had a wild look on his face and began his trip down. They were facing off. Little did Nyx know a battle was about to ensue.
Begin, the proctor shouted. Nyx felt there was something extremely wrong. It was the same feeling she had before the Uchiha massacre happened. She went running to Michi sensei, who was sitting in the stands. So you felt it too, huh? He said. What's going on? She asked. Not sure. Our instincts just tell us when danger is coming, not what the danger is, he said calmly. Just then a bunch of feathers began to fall from the sky. Genjutsu release. Michi shouted. Nyx got the message and did the same.
she saw a bunch of sound and sand ninjas jump out of the shadows.
I see this as a declaration of war. Get ready to fight Nyx, he said. Nyx positioned herself, then realized Sasuke was no longer in the ring, but where'd he go?
Nyx, focus. Your cousin can take care of himself, Michi said. She nodded and followed Michi out of the stadium. He and Nyx battled through many sound and sand. Her bloodlust kicked in. Running faster than they could see, she sliced through hundreds of them until they retreated. She stood there covered in the blood of her enemies. She used so much energy she clasped.
Nyx, Michi said, running over to her. It was just as he suspected. An enemy got one good shot. There was a kunai sticking out of her chest. He examined her. Luckily it had only nicked her heart, not pierced it, but it was going to be a long recovery, at least for a vampire. He picked her up and rushed her off to the hospital.
Nyx woke up in the hospital and looked around and saw Michi looking over her.
Ugh, Michi-sensei, why do I feel like I have a knot in my chest? She asked, grabbing her chest. You nicked your heart. It was enough to injure you but not kill you, he said.
You need to guard your heart and your head more than any other part of you. You can regenerate everything else, but lose either of those and you die, he explained in a calm voice. You don't have to be so grim about it, sensei, Nyx said, starting to sit up. Just then a nurse walked in. Is awake, she has a visitor, she said sweetly. Michi nodded and someone rushed in. Nyx, you're up, Naruto shouted with a huge smile. Hey, good thing to Sasuke has been flipping out about it. He's been drowning himself in training to try and get his mind off it, he said, sitting in a chair. Nyx started to say something when the nurse walked in again. Nyx, you have another visitor, she said. It was Sasuke. You're all right, good, he said with a sigh of relief, but he looked like he had something else on his mind. What's wrong, Sasuke? You look worried, Naruto said before Nyx could say something. I was getting to that. Nyx, please do me a favor, Sasuke said. Depends on what it is, Nyx said, crossing her arms.
Give up being a ninja for your own safety, he said, looking away from her.
What? She started to scream. Are you crazy, Sasuke? Like she would do that, Naruto shouted.
Stay out of this, Naruto, Sasuke said with anger in his voice.
Nyx, you almost got killed out there. Every doctor agrees it was a miracle you survived, he screamed at her. She swears she could see tears come to his eyes, but she was furious. What, you expect me to be some kind of housemaid or get a job as a cook or something while you go off risking your life? Yeah, sure, like that's going to happen, she screamed at him. I just want you to be safe, he yelled back. I'll be fine, okay? Don't worry about me so much, she said, trying to sound a little sweet. He started to grumble and left the room. Naruto looks at Nyx and starts to tell her about his battle with Gaara. Meanwhile, in Orochimaru's lair, Orochimaru was brewing about his defeat when a certain boy with cat ears popped up out of nowhere. Oh, I heard your plans failed. Don't ask how I know. I am everywhere and nowhere, Schrödinger stated. What do you want? Kabuto asked, reaching for a kunai. Wait, hear me out before you try and kill me, Schrödinger said. All right, we're listening, Orochimaru said with an evil look in his eye. But this better be good, Kabuto added. Well, I'm part of a group called Millennium. We heard you wanted the strength to destroy what you call the Leaf Village. Well, we can give it to you, but you first need to get us a girl called Nyx, and after some testing we can make the ultimate troop which we would let you use to destroy that eyesore of yours. What do you say? Do we have a deal? He asked with a wicked smile on his face. That sounds perfect. I'll catch the girl for you, but if you don't mind me asking, what is so important about this girl? Orochimaru asked, smiling just as wickedly. Oh, of course not. The girl is a rare phenomenon that only happens once every 500 years. The child of 2 vampires, and not just any vampires. She the daughter of the Unlife King. She has power beyond belief locked up inside her, Schrödinger said. Kabuto looked confused. There is no such thing, he shouted. There is. I'm one of them. I could probably turn you into a ghoul easy, but if you still don't believe me, come on, stab me, cut me into pieces, I'll be fine, he said, smiling wickedly and flashing his fangs. You asked for it, Kabuto said, pulling out a kunai. He ran up and sliced an arm off, but it regenerated. What? He shouted. Well, I'm fully convinced, Orochimaru said. It's a deal. We'll catch that little girl you want. Just make sure you keep your part of the deal, he said, glaring at Schrödinger. Excellent, we'll be in touch, Schrödinger replied, disappearing into the darkness afterward. Kabuto, pull up all the research you have on this girl. We need to be prepared to catch her if she does not want to come willingly, Orochimaru ordered. Right, Kabuto said, walking off to get his ninja cards. Nix had just gotten out of the hospital and was rushing over to meet Naruto at the ramen stand. As she ran past some men in weird cloaks that were dark blue with red clouds on it. She got a bad feeling about them. She ran to get away. When she got to the ramen stand, she heard a "Hey Nix." From Naruto. He motioned for her to sit next to him. She was relieved she had something to get off her chest. "Hey Naruto, do you remember that weird dog with 6 eyes that showed up just in the nick of time that one day?" Nix asked. "MMMHHHMM," he said with a mouth full of ramen. "I think that was my father," she said, waiting for his response. Cough. "What?" he screamed while coughing up some ramen. She started to explain about her dream before the finals. Naruto listened carefully. When she stopped, he spoke up. "It was just a dream, Nix," he responded. Nix shook her head. "It's the voice I hear inside my head from time to time, and Michi-sensei says that vampires normally communicate mentally, so maybe I still have a family trying to find me," she said in a hushed tone. "I don't know, maybe I guess it's possible," he said, leaning back. Just then Jiraiya showed up and started talking to Naruto. Nix had a feeling something bad was happening. She felt very uneasy. She put enough money on the counter to pay for both her and Naruto, then ran off. What she saw did not settle her uneasiness at all. A knocked-out Kakashi was being carried by Guy back to his house. She had a feeling that this had something to do with the men in weird cloaks she saw earlier. She ran with them to Kakashi's house. "What happened?" she asked. "Look at Kakashi. He got knocked out, that's what," Asuma said. "I mean, how? I can help. I'm training to become a medical ninja," she said calmly, examining Kakashi's head. "Nix, it's nice you want to help, but we don't think there's anything you can do," Kurenai said, placing her hand on Nix's shoulders. Just then Sasuke walked and was asking the same questions she was when someone had to bring up Itachi. Sasuke ran off. "You really want to help Nix? Go get your cousin before he does something stupid," Asuma said calmly. Nix nodded and ran off after him, with Guy following close behind.
"Wait, I'm coming too," he said. Nix sighed. He was only going to slow her down, but she didn't have a choice. They ran to follow Sasuke, when Nix again got a feeling something bad was happening.
"Sorry Guy, but I have to go ahead. Catch up when you can," she said, darting off with all her speed. She followed his scent straight to him when she saw he was being held by the wrist, and the person who was holding him was Itachi. She also saw Naruto, then the blue man in an identical outfit as Itachi's talked about cutting an arm off of Naruto. This infuriated Nix. She ran so fast and got in the way, getting her own arm cut off. Sasuke looked on horrified. "No, Nix!" he screamed, but she didn't stop. She just used her regeneration skill to form a new arm. It worked like a charm. Everyone in the room was surprised. She then felt her bloodlust kick in. Sasuke went back to fighting Itachi, and it finally was revealed to her how Kakashi was knocked out as Itachi used Tsukuyomi on Sasuke. Just then Nix started to growl and hiss like a wild animal. Her eyes turned blood red. She tried to attack both of them, but Itachi dropped Sasuke and slammed Nix against a wall, but she wasn't hurt. She used all her strength to kick him away. He was startled but still able to fight. "Is this really the girl I rescued all those years ago?" he thought to himself. Just then Jiraiya appeared and used his toad mouth trap jutsu to get them away from Naruto and restrained Nix. She was out of control. After Itachi and his partner left, his partner spoke up. "Does that girl have a demon or something?" he asked. "More like something. I didn't sense any demon chakra from her," he said, looking downward. "Something's on your mind. What is it?" his partner asked. "I know her. She a far cry from the girl I rescued all those years ago. I convinced the Uchiha clan to take her in too, but the roof over her head, it came at a price for her," he said in an unemotional voice. "And that is?" his partner asked, intrigued why Itachi would even care. "She has to be married to an Uchiha when she reaches the proper age, but she never found out about it. Neither did my little brother," he said as they made their way back to their hideout. Nix followed Guy all the way back to the village where they took Sasuke to the hospital, where she found Michi working again. He again took her on rounds. After that they went out to train in the training fields, but they weren't alone. Someone she didn't want to see showed up. Well, this is a nice surprise. The monster is taking lessons," Anderson said, laughing. "Who are you and what do you want?" Michi said. "My name is Alexander Anderson and I here to kill that monster over there," he said, pointing to Nix. She got into fighting stance. "You won't come near her, Nix. Stand back," Michi said, darting forward, getting out a kunifei. After several minutes Anderson got on good shot and pinned Michi to a tree. He screamed out a little in pain. "Michi-sensei!" she cried out. She knew she had to use the trick she learned, but she was reluctant. Then she heard Anderson laughing.
So you're a vampire to huh? He raised his blade. This is a good day, he said, preparing to plunge his blade in Michi's chest. Nyx quickly made a rectangle with her fingers.
Restriction release level 3 inches, she shouted. Anderson quickly sat up and took notice. Black tendrils came out of her and attacked Anderson. She tore him to pieces and ran over to Michi to help him. She pulled out the blade, but it burned so badly that she dropped as soon as it was out. It's silver. This man was a vampire hunter, I'm guessing. Let's go, Michi started to say when Anderson regenerated. Well, look, as if I need more preparation to kill you. I'll be back, you can count on it, he said, disappearing in a rush of paper. Well, looks like we have trouble. Come on, let's return to town. I don't want to tempt fate, he said, walking back towards town. You also don't have to be afraid to use that gift you have, he stated plainly. But I'm just afraid I'll lose control, Nyx replied. That is always a risk that we deal with. It's a part of life. The best we can do is try to be careful and avoid the things that push our buttons, or learn to suppress your instincts, which I will teach you, he said, looking back with a smile. She smiled back. Ever since she found Michi, she feels like she's not the only one of her kind anymore. She just sucked at hiding the fact that she is a vampire. Naruto returned with the new Hokage Lady Tsunade. She revived Sasuke and Kakashi. Sasuke was really quiet and simply trained, but after a couple of days he spoke up. Nyx, how did you regenerate your arm a while back? He asked. Nyx looked down at the can of tomato juice she had just warmed up. She didn't know if she should tell him or not. What would he think of her? But she held her breath and decided to spill. Sasuke, I'm not human, she began. Oh yeah, right, he said, finishing his rice. If you don't want to tell me, fine, just don't lie, okay, he said. After that he walked out the door. He didn't talk to her much after that. About a month later he came to the training fields and grabbed her. Come on, we're leaving, he said, dragging her through the woods. At this point she had enough. She pulled her arm away. Are you kidding me? Where are we going then? She asked, a little annoyed. To Orochimaru. He wants both of us, he said. Nyx had a look of disgust on her face. I'm not going anywhere, she said stubbornly. Yes you are. Don't make me knock you out, he said. I'm not going to abandon my friends. Fine, you're weak, worthless, you can stay here for all I care, he said, running off. But what he said hurt Nyx bad. She started to cry. Now she really was alone. She ran back to the village, out habit running to the hospital where Michi was. He quickly sensed her sadness and rushed to her side. Now stop crying. You will lose people all your life. After all, you live for eternity. Other people don't. It's in your best interest not to dwell on the past, he said, patting her on the head. She nodded. After a few hours the hospital became very busy. Neji, Choji, and Naruto pulse a few more all need emergency care. Nyx could believe what was happening, but she kept focused on her job. Afterwards Michi came up to her with an offer. He was going to leave the village for some training for about 2 years. He wanted her to come with him. Nyx thought about her friends that got injured and nodded. She wanted to get stronger to protect them. She wanted to protect everyone. She left the next day with Michi, promising everyone she would return. Nyx hadn't seen the Leaf Village in over 2 years. Michi had been impressed by her progress. She was still the sweet-hearted girl she always was, but with some differences. Michi had taught her that one of her greatest assets was that she was virtually irresistible to any man. She now was the hottest thing you could look at. When she got back, Naruto's team had just returned from getting Gaara away from Akatsuki. She ran straight to Naruto. Naruto, she shouted, rather excited to see her old friend again. He was facing the other way, but when he heard her voice he turned around smiling, but he wasn't expecting what he saw. He started to drool a bit. She was hot. Nyx, oh wow, you've changed, he said, eyes as wide as saucers. Lee was also pretty impressed. She wore really short shorts and a tube top with a jacket. Her headband was worn like a choker and it was all black. She giggled. Stop staring, I'm not going anywhere, jeez, and I'm still the same sweetheart of a girl I was years ago, okay? She explained, but they were too awe-struck to listen. She rolled her eyes. Went around town seeing how things have changed. When she met her team they were shocked. Seiko looked as if he was about to have a heart attack. She was about to talk to Kin, seeing if he wanted to pick on her now, but she sensed Naruto was being attacked. She ran to see Naruto fighting with a guy wearing all black, and when she heard what he said about Naruto, I'm not repeating it, but man, that guy got some nerve. She flipped out. So the guy was playful. How well two can play at this game. She jumped out of the treetops and formed some hand signs. Black Rose Jutsu Petal Dance of Death. A razor wind of black rose petals flew out of nowhere and tore his papers apart. She was furious with him. Nobody insults my friends, She said her vampire eyes were activated and she was baring her fangs, which were huge. She looked like a monster. Her chakra was as black as night and very powerful. He decided to run off before this girl tried to tear him to pieces, which she wanted to do. When he ran off, Naruto placed his hand on her shoulder.
"Nyx, are you okay?" She closed her eyes and returned to normal.
"I'm fine," she replied. She rushed off. She needed some blood to drink. She no longer cared for human food. It was just a waste for her. All she needed was blood. She was real careful about where she drank it, to never in front of anyone. Afterwards, Naruto said that Lady Tsunade said that she wanted Nyx to go on a mission to get information about Sasuke and Orochimaru. She wrinkled her nose at this idea. She didn't really want to go. Sasuke made his own choice. Besides, it will never be like it was years ago. She just wanted to move on, but a friend was begging her for help, so she agreed.
She didn't like who she was going with either. She didn't trust Sai, the one who had insulted Naruto. He called Nyx a monster, but she didn't react. It was the truth. After all, she was to a human a monster. Naruto defended her, but she put up her hand and shook her head. She thought about what happened that one day and shuddered. Michi said she did a good thing by cleaning up the scum that tried to hurt her, but she simply could not get over what she did to them. She can still hear them talking to her inside her head, but Michi said that that was normal when you drain a really human instead of drinking a blood packet, because blood is the currency of the soul.
"It's the truth, Naruto, and you know it," she said, starting to cry. Sai smiled. Naruto was confused. No matter how much he pressed her, it would not come out. She would not talk about it. Nyx sensed they weren't alone. She stopped. "Go on ahead, I'll catch up," she shouted at them. They started to argue, but she glared at them, so they nodded and went on their way.
"When are you going to learn?" she shouted, laughing to a figure in the brush.
"I will kill you this time, monster," a voice said as he came out from the brush. Nyx got in battle position. She hated him. He cracked a grin. "So, monster, ready to die?" Anderson said. She loved a good challenge. "Just try it," she shouted. He lunged at her, but she was too fast for him.
"How you could kill a mouse?" she said again. Her darker side was coming out, the side that enjoyed killing. She always tried to keep it in check, but sometime it just leaked. By the time she was finished with him, she had made him run off again. She then ran off to catch up with Naruto, who had finally found Sasuke. She saw Sasuke try to kill Naruto, so she jumped in the way. He stabbed her in the chest. Instead, he looked like he didn't even flinch until "Nyx!" Naruto shouted. Sasuke's eyes went wide. He stabbed his cousin, not mention Orochimaru wanted her alive. He pulled out the blade. She shouldn't have gotten in the way, he thought, but everyone was surprised when she started laughing, the creepiest laugh you could imagine, got up. There was no stopping it now. Her dark side had fully kicked in. "You idiot, I told you a long time ago, but you just wouldn't listen. I'm not human. A simple stab won't kill me," she said, grinning. Naruto started to get worried. She's gone totally psychotic. A human ninja going off the deep end is bad enough, but a vampire, oh boy, he thought to himself. She charged with a ton of speed, but he got out the way. "You've gone insane. What happened to you?" he asked. She again started to laugh and form more hand signs to use her Thorn Seven's jutsu, which Sasuke dodged. "I simply accepted what I am and used to my full advantage," she said, smirking. At this point, Yamato had enough. She was out of control. He used his jutsu to subdue her. He had to knock her out. She later woke up tied to a tree. Naruto was arguing with Yamato while no one else was around. "No, I promised I wouldn't tell," he shouted. "Then I will. I'm sick of pretending to be something I'm not," Nyx said. "I'm a vampire," she said, waiting for a reaction. He just froze. She could just break the rope if she wanted to. Yamato's side, he was willing to believe her, especially after a show like that. "Since when?" he asked. "Since I was born," she replied.
"Well, if it was for that long, I guess you're not dangerous, but that psychotic break had us worried," he stated. "It was my dark side. Every vampire has one. I try to keep it in check, but sometimes it slips," she stated. He nodded and untied her. Sai came back with food and Sakura had firewood. Nyx didn't eat anything. She had already had a meal. She decided to run for the leaf because the others would take forever, but on the way she ran into some trouble. 2 men in Akatsuki cloaks.
Nyx was in a lot of trouble. She was still tired from the fights earlier. In fact, her bad ears could pop up at any time because she couldn't hold the transformation she used to hide them. "Well, what do we have here on?" said the blonde. He had a perverted look on his face. "It looks like a girl." "Deidara-senpai," said the guy in the orange and black mask. Nyx got ready to fight with the energy she had left when out of the blue Michi ran up and got in between her and the 2 men. "Michi-sensei, what are you doing here?" she asked. "I sensed you needed help. Go run. I can take on these 2. He said. She nodded and ran, but Deidara ran after her, while the man in the mask stayed to face Michi.
Well, it's been a while, Mandara Uchiha. Michi said. Same to you, Michi, old friend. It's weird, you never seem to age a day, and I have to say you have quite the student, Mandara said behind his mask. Stay away from her, you don't know what you're dealing with now. If you call off the blonde, we can part peacefully, Michi said. Oh, I don't think so. She a good friend of Naruto and would make the perfect bait, Mandara said.
Don't you dare touch her, I will protect her with my life, Michi said, beginning to try to run towards Nyx to help her, but Mandara blocked his path. Well then, I guess you have to die after all. I believe you lived long enough, Mandara said. Meanwhile, Nyx had gotten away from Deidara and back to the Leaf Village. Worried, she contacted Michi through mental communication, but she got nothing. She ran back as fast as she could. She didn't care if she was out of chakra or not. She ran back and found Michi, the man who treated her as if she was his own child, stabbed through the heart, dead. Nyx felt as if her whole world had just come crashing down. She was truly alone now. She lost the only person in the world that understood her. The one that took care of her when times got tough. He treated her like his own daughter. She could believe he was gone. She got just a little closer. Heard one last mental message. Drink my blood, she heard faintly in her head before the connection was completely severed. She started to cry and started remember all the things he did for her, but then she heard someone approach. You're coming with us, yeah? Deidara said, looking smug. She knew immediately what she had to do. She bit Michi's neck and drank her fill of the blood, which freaked out the two men, but they regained composure and tried to grab her. She jumped backward and formed hand signs. Black Rose Jutsu Rose Thorn Sebans, she shouted, throwing out hundreds of sebans coming from black roses that she summoned the god behind some trees to get out of the way. A few clay birds came her way and blew up, but when the smoke cleared they only found a giant black rose. She had shielded herself from the blast inside. She came out full speed, punching Deidara. The man Deidara called Toby got behind her and tried to grab her, but she was way too fast. She tried punching him and it went straight through him. She was confused but kept her wits about her. She jumped backwards to avoid a counter-attack. She decided that this would take some extra muscle. She formed her hands into a rectangle. Restriction release level 3 inches. She shouted. Black inky tendrils start coming out of her shadow. She focused her attention on the two men in front of her and the tendrils attacked Deidara, and Toby had enough at this point and ran. She quickly gained control of herself and deactivated the restriction release. At that point she looked at the body of her old mentor and decided to bury him out of respect. She ran back to the Leaf Village and spent the rest of the day crying in her room. Nyx had moved on from Michi's death. She knew that would be what he would have wanted. She worked in the hospital from time to time, but she mostly trained. She focused more on mastering, combining her dark side with her stable side, something that would allow her to use devastating attacks without looking. She's gone off the deep end. She also peeked in on Naruto's training from the shadows. He never sensed but Kakashi did. He often told her to go away. One day she sensed a gathering and heard more Akatsuki were in the land of fire. After the ninjas left, she went back to her train. There was no point in sticking her nose in where she wasn't wanted. She went back to training. Nyx had just gotten back from an escort mission with her team. She ran off into the woods to enjoy a nice fresh blood packet when she sensed she was not alone. I swear, do you ever give up? She shouted. No, I don't, monster. Mark my words, the next Hellsing secret weapon will fall, Anderson said, starting to rant about something she didn't understand, so she used some hand signs. Black Rose Jutsu Binding Thorns of Death, she shouted. Thousands of roses popped out of the ground, grabbing Anderson. He sliced through them and came at her full force, splashing some liquid on her. It burned like crazy and blinded her, but she focused and ignored the pain, jumping and head on, moving faster than Anderson could see. She used her sense of smell to sense where he was at and used another jutsu. Black Rose Jutsu Shadow Rose of Death, she shouted. A rose came out of the ground and crushed him like a bug, but she ran because she knew that would not keep him down for long. She got out of there so fast she forgot to wipe the blood off her face. She ran back home and cleaned herself up, but then thought about what he said. Hellsing. She ran down to the record books and looked everywhere for that name, but there was nothing. She ran to Lady Tsunade. Maybe I was a past clan that got wiped out. Hellsing, I'm sorry, I've never heard of such a name. Why do you ask? She asked. I think that's my clan name, either that or my family worked for them, Nyx responded. Well, I keep an eye out for it, so go on. For now I have work to do, Tsunade said. That night her father appeared in her dreams. Father, she shouted to him. This was now the 4th time this happened. After all, the link was very weak. Nix, you're on the right track. The Helsing organization is your home. If anyone ever says they're working for Helsing, you can probably trust them. Find Helsing and you'll find your home," he said as he faded into darkness. She woke up abruptly, getting it was still night and she was getting hungry. She grabbed a blood packet and thought about the dream she just had.
Nix Helsing. Huh, that doesn't sound so bad. I'm in charge now, Sasuke said to Kabuto. This is after he kills Orochimaru. And I suppose you have a better plan than Orochimaru to capture the one we wanted? A voice rang out. He turned to see a boy with cat ears.
"And you are?" Sasuke asked. "I'm Schrödinger." Orochimaru said he would help the Millennium catch Nix, but now that you're in charge I guess you'll get her for us, he said, twitching his ears. Kabuto was no longer around, but no one really cared that much. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. "What do you want with my cousin?" he asked. Now we won't hurt her. She just has a purpose to fulfill. She's been denying it for far too long," Schrödinger said with a twisted smile.
"And that is?" Sasuke asked, not sure if he should trust this person.
"You'll just have to see," he said. "Okay, I'll bring her to you, but if she gets hurt, believe me, you won't live to see another day," Sasuke said, turning away from Schrödinger, who disappeared with a wicked smile on his face. Nix had finished another blood packet. She was really hungry lately. "What is going on with me?" she thought. "It's a blood moon. Don't worry, it will pass," she heard a familiar voice say in her head. She looked around. She could have sworn that it was Michi. "It is me. I never left you. Remember what I said? Blood is the currency of the soul. You now carry my soul within your body. I would never just leave you," the voice said. She started to cry a little bit.
"Now listen, I've observed through the weak mental link you and your father have. You're more special than you think, okay, and I think you need to know this now. You're the no-life princess," he said. Nix, who had been drinking a blood packet, started coughing it up.
"What?" she shouted out loud. Good thing nobody was around. She would have looked absolutely crazy.
"You heard me. Please don't faint. Any pain you feel I know feel okay, and I'd hate for you to hit your head," he said calmly. "Why didn't you tell me you were inside my head now, sensei?" Nix asked.
"You need to learn how to deal with lose, and I think you did pretty good," he said. She could see him, but she knew he was smiling.
"Now then, maybe we should train a bit more," he said. "But I'm still hungry," Nix replied. "Fine, how about a hunt then?" he said very playfully. But Michi-sensei, that wrong," she said, mortified that he would even say something like that. "Animals, not people, but to pick off a few criminals wouldn't hurt," he said in a joking manner. Nix just rolled her eyes. He was like this even in life, and now she was going to have to put up with it for eternity, but she wasn't complaining. She was just glad to have him back. "So if I'm the no-life princess, does that mean other vampires have to do what I say?" Nix asked teasingly. No, it means you're one of the most powerful of vampires, so natural vampires will probably listen to out of fear and respect," Michi replied in her head, laughing. "Oh well, so what's the new power you're going to teach me?" Nix asked. She never got used to mental communication. "We're going to take a trip to a temple a long way from here. With your speed it should take an hour," Michi replied. An hour? You want me to run for an hour? Straght, Nix shouted.
"Oh, stop complaining. I will feel just as worn down as you," Michi said. "It's still a long way to run," Nix said. "Well, think of training now. Let's get moving. Go to the north and don't stop," Michi said, smiling inside her. No, he could still push her buttons. She ran as fast as she could. About an hour later, she reached an abandoned temple. She was tired. "Michi-sensei, can I?" That was all she managed to get out when she heard heartbeats. She looked around and found the two people in Akatsuki cloaks. They were close enough that they could see or hear her, but she had the high ground. She was safe for now, but she had to hurry. "Get inside quickly," Michi said inside her head. She ran inside. The place looked run down and ransacked. It was a mess.
"Move the statue quick. I don't want anyone else getting their hands on this," he said. She moved the giant statue that looked like a bat. Under it was a scroll. "Yes, it's still here right where I left it. Okay, now open, and where you see an empty space, sigh your name." "But my clan, I don't really know the symbol for it," Nix said, looking for the empty space. "The symbol on your hand, that is the symbol of Helsing. Where you're from?" Michi replied. Nix nodded and pulled off one of her fingerless gloves. She copied the symbol exactly, which was no easy task, but she did it. "Okay, close your eyes, I'll show you the hand signs," Michi said. She obeyed. Just then the doors opened. "Well, looks like we have a leaf ninja here. A man with piercings," said Nix. Got ready to fight.
"No, use the jutsu and fly out of here," Michi said. "Fly? Nyx said out loud. She was a little shocked, but she cut her finger with her fang and formed the jutsu.
Summoning jutsu. Nyx shouted. A giant bat appeared. She hoped on. Let's get out of here, she shouted the bat to off once they were far enough. Name's Koda. You're Michi's student, I presume, he said. Yeah, but about Michi. She started. No need, I already guessed. So a new vampire, this will be fun, he said as he began to go in a turn and Nyx held on tighter.
Don't worry, I won't drop you. After all, bats are signs of good fortune and morals. You're in good hands, or should I say wings, he said, starting to laugh. Nyx just rolled her eyes. He found a good place to put her down. It was on a rooftop. Here's the Leaf Village. You should be good here. I got to go. Call me whenever. See ya, he said, disappearing in a puff of smoke. Hey Nyx, she hear Naruto from a distance. She look over to see him closing in.
Hey, since when can you summon a bat, and did you happen to see Sasuke or Itachi while you were up there? He asked. Nyx shook her head.
Darn it, well, you can help us track them down. Did you hear Sasuke killed Orochimaru, he said. Nyx narrowed her eyes.
Why should I be interested in what my cousins do? Besides, I have a new clan I identify with. And that is? Naruto asked, intrigued. I'm Nyx Hellsing, she replied back. Okay, Nyx Hellsing, but come on, the Uchiha clan raised you and you're just going to turn your back on them, he said.
Yeah, most of them didn't treat me right. Some of them even used me as a punching bag. I got new bruises every other day. The only nice ones were Itachi, Sasuke and a few others. I was never welcomed. I have no idea why they kept me around, cause clearly I didn't matter to them, she said, starting to cry. Nyx, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell me? Did Sasuke know about this? Naruto asked. No, I don't think he would care, but Itachi knew and he kept me away from those people when he could, Nyx responded. Naruto looked over at her.
That's why you weren't that sad when they all died, Naruto said. Yeah, I just want to know why Itachi did that, she said. Naruto put his hand on her shoulder. Well, can you help out anyways? Maybe you can knock some sense into Sasuke. He might listen to you, Naruto pleaded. Fine, I'll help, but you need to help me out, okay? Nyx said. Sure, anything. What do you need? Naruto responded. I need to find my family. They're out there, I know it, and they're look for me, Nyx said, looking up at the sky. Someday I'll find them. Nyx joined the search along with Naruto. She flew on her newfound friends. Suddenly his ears perked up. What is it? Nyx asked. I hear explosions, Koda said. Let's check it out, she said. They flew over to the site and found Sasuke fighting Deidara. Whoa, now this is a party, Koda said. Deidara senpai, isn't that the girl that drove us off last time? Toby said, point to Nyx on top of the bat. Well, so it is he. Maybe Toby take care of the girl, okay? Sasuke looked up to see Nyx flying on Koda. Deidara senpai, that's not fair. She's flying. I can't fly you. Toby started to whine when Nyx came down and attacked Toby head on. That's from Michi sensei, Nyx shouted. All right, at a girl, Michi shouted in her head. Oh, you mean the guy the first killed, don't you mean for, he said. Koda, go get the others, I'll be fine here, Nyx shouted. Roger, he said, flying off. Clearly you don't know much about me and Michi, she said, following Toby into the woods. And how come he called you Toby when your real name is Madara Uchiha? Nyx said in a confident tone of voice. At this point they were out of range of Deidara and Sasuke. Well, maybe there's more to you than I thought, but how did you know, he said. Blood. Blood is the currency of the soul, and vampires like me can harvest a person's soul from drinking it. When I drank Michi's blood, his soul transferred to me and now lives inside me, Nyx said. Hence I now know everything he knows, she said, smiling, when all of a sudden. Kaboom! Looks like Sasuke's history. There goes one of your marriage option, Madara said. Yes, he knows about it. He is an Uchiha. Excuse me? Nyx said, shocked. Oh, no one told you, did they? You were accepted into the clan on one condition: you were to marry an Uchiha, he said, smiling under his mask. Nyx was horrified. Was that the only reason that kept her around? That doesn't matter now, Nyx screamed. Oh yes it does. That paper we made you sign when you were a little girl after Itachi found you, that was what it entailed. You already signed yourself over to us, he said. Nyx felt like she was going to be sick, but she regained her composure and fought him off. She ran back to the site of the explosion. Naruto and the rest of the gang. Nyx, what happened here? I don't know, and I don't care. I don't want to hear about the Uchihas ever again. Okay, just leave me alone, Nyx said, hopping on to Koda. Wait, Nyx, come back, let's talk. Are you okay? What happened, Nyx? Naruto shouted. Wow, something sure got under her skin. I wonder what's wrong, Kiba stated. We can deal with her later. Right now we need to focus, Yamato. Maybe I can go talk to her real quick. She didn't go far, Hinata said. Okay, but make it quick, Kakashi said. Hinata ran over to where Nyx was. Nyx, please tell me what wrong. We really need your help, she said. Nyx sighed and spilled what she just heard. You have to what? Hinata shouted. Ugh, I know why. Why does this stuff always happens to me? She started to say when Hinata put her hand on Nyx's shoulder. Maybe once Sasuke comes back he'll relieve you of that promise. Or maybe he'll use it to get away from the girls that chase him in the village, Nyx stated. Yes, there is that, but Naruto and the others need you, please, Nyx.
Sorry, I'm done. I just want to move on and I wish others would do the same. Nyx said. She got back on Kota and flew off, but not in the direction of the leaf. She wanted to go to a place where she felt at peace a year ago. It was the perfect place for getting rid of troubles. It was a field of flower where she was just able to let go of the past. There's no point in hanging on to it. But she ran into a problem. She found Sasuke before everyone else.
Get her down from there and hold her here. I have some business with her, Sasuke said. Jugo asked the birds to attack the bat. Just leave me alone. I want nothing to do with you or any of the Uchihas. Get out of my life, she shouted as she bit a bird and drained its blood. Ugh, I hate bird blood, she said, spiting out the bird. It dropped right onto Jugo's head. She drained it of blood. She not human, Karen said. Watch what you say about my cousin, Sasuke said. So she's an Uchiha? Suigetsu asked. No, my name is Nyx Hellsing, she shouted, fighting off the birds. Hold on a sec, Suigetsu said. He threw his sword at Kota. He shrieked and dropped Nyx. He then disappeared in a poof. Nyx started to cry again. I got her, Suigetsu said as he caught her and knocked her out. Good, keep her with you. I'll go on ahead, Sasuke said. No need for that, I'll take her right now, Schrödinger said, appearing out of nowhere. She better not get hurt, Sasuke said. As I told you, she won't, he said, taking Nyx. Now can you tell me what you need her for? Do you know what her name means? It means daughter of chaos. She will be the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, he said, disappearing into the darkness. What the? Sasuke, you just gave your cousins to a bunch of psychopaths, Karen shouted. She's weak, they won't get much out of her. Don't worry, now let's go, Sasuke said. Nyx woke up in a barren room and looked around. She went up to a wall and tried to phase through, but halfway through. Ouch! She shouted as she felt the tips of her fingers burn. Don't bother, this room is laced with silver. You can't escape, Schrödinger said, appearing in the room. She charged at him, wanting to rip him to shreds. We'll come to get you in a few minutes for testing, he said, disappearing once more. She then climbed up to the only window in the room and looked out. This was a huge place, a camp set up in the mountains somewhere. She knew she was somewhere in the land of fire. Now she need help. The door opened. Come on, kid, nice and easy. The doctor just wants to run some test, the man said. No way in hell, she said, rushing out the door. She was now outside and there were soldiers everywhere. She was strong, but she could take on all these people not all at once, not even with her restriction release level 2. Use level 0 inches. She heard in her head. Her eyes went wide. Was she ready for such a leap? She hadn't even used level 1, but she had to try. She formed her hands in the shape of an rectangle. Restriction release level 0 inches, she shouted. As soon as she did, green spikes came out of the ground and impaled everyone, the soldiers, for as far as she could see. She then dropped the restriction release. She had used every ounce of energy in her body. She collapsed. The poles turned into giant black roses with the victims still hanging there. When Nyx woke up, she was in the hospital. Lady Tsunade was standing over her. Good, you're up. You have someone who says they know you and you said to look out for the name Hellsing, right? She said. Yeah, I did, she said, sitting up. Well, I'll let him in, Tsunade said, walking out the door. Hey, you okay? Whoa, you've grown. Of course, the last time I saw you was when you were about 6 years old. A man with a strange accent said. He had braided dirty blonde hair, almost brownish red, and an eye patch. He was also smoking. Who are you? Nyx asked. He looked sort of familiar, but she couldn't remember. Oh, you must not remember anything, he said. He started to explain everything to her. I'm Pip. We've been looking for you for some time. Your father never gave up. He was convinced you were alive, and well, he was right. You're named as the Hellsing heir. You're supposed to protect the world from evil vampires that cause others harm. So you ready to go home? He asked, reaching out his hand. She was about to say yes, but there was a disturbance in the distance. I have to do a few things first, stay here please, she said. Running out the door she ran until she found what she was looking for, a dying Itachi. She ran up to him and bent down to his level. You saved me, now I can save you, but you have to accept the consciences, she said. He simply nodded, too weak to speak. She bent down and bit him. He didn't even budge, he was too weak. She carried him to a secluded field where you woke up. What did you do? He asked. I just simply did what a vampire does best, bite, she said with a smile. After the bite she finally understood why Itachi did what he did. He had a stunned look on his face. Vampire? You're no vampire, he said. Yes I am. Now come on, I have one more thing to do before I go back home, Nyx said. Itachi was bewildered but followed. He felt like he didn't have a choice. She went back to Pip and followed him back to the cave. He was not sure about Itachi, but he didn't really have a choice. She came upon a huge mansion. Hey, welcome home, Nyx, Pip said. She could barely contain herself. She started to cry and run toward the house. Her memories started to come back to her and she felt right at home. Lady Tsunade, where's Nyx? I haven't seen her in a month. Ever since that huge power surge of hers she's disappeared. Is she in some sort of trouble? Naruto shouted. No, she told me to give you this. I've just been busy, she said, handing him a note. Dear Naruto, I finally found where I come from. I'm supposed to go through lots of studies to become the next leader of the Hellsing organization, but if you're ever in trouble I'll be there for you because you were always there for me. I could ask for a better friend. I'll try to visit, though. Your best friend, Nyx. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.